Nation. Welcome to the weekly Ingles on the Beat segment. Comes to you every Monday by way of the Ingles supermarkets. Certainly appreciate their support and sponsorship. Check out an Ingles near you soon. And feel free to comment today. This is a Facebook Live production on our Dog Nation Facebook page. If you've got any comments or questions, I will periodically check my phone where I have the online account pulled up and I can see some questions and interact with you all as we talk Georgia football. A little bit of basketball news to start out, not end of the world stuff, but as expected, Tyshawn Hightower, sophomore point guard from Lithonia, started 17 out of the 29 games he played this year, has announced he's leaving the Georgia program. This was somewhat expected. Hightower hasn't played in 3 of the last 4 games. Sometimes coaches come in and, players for whatever reason just don't fit the system. And when you look at what Tom Crean's doing in recruiting with this top 100 class, 4 top 100 players, it's unprecedented in Georgia history. A lot of those guys from 6'4 to 6'6 play the same spots Hightower does. So the writing was on the wall. He's going to go elsewhere. Georgia loses 6 seniors. So there's going to be some attrition. It's going to be a different looking team right now from that 2-16 SEC team, 11-21. Rayshawn Hammonds will be back. It's huge, 6'8", 240. He was a top 100 recruit. Nicholas Claxton's still waiting to decide. We expect him to come back, but he's going to explore that process, I believe. So just some news on Georgia basketball to start you out. I know it's March Madness weekend, and for a guy like me that has covered some NCAA teams in my career, you kind of got the itch. You feel like you should be writing about a bracket somewhere, right? And I will still fill out brackets. I will watch the games from my home as opposed to being on site somewhere. But next year, I think that's going to be different for Georgia basketball. Next year, I think Georgia basketball will be in the NCAA tournament. We know this. Georgia football is a Final Four team this year. At least we think they are. When you take a look at what Kirby Smart has built and what's coming back. And over the last week or so, I've kind of amped up my 3 things, 4 things, questions about stories on different position groupings. And these stories are a little different. We saw Chip Towers did some really deep dives into each position group. I thought really just great stuff. No reason to go out and buy preview magazines when it's all free right here on Dog Nation. And, Chip obviously has covered the program for a long time. So his perspective on position grouping is always interesting because he's able to compare it with past Georgia groups. And so he did those really deep dives, and those are all on Dog Nation if you want to look at the position groups and depth chart type of things. My take was more from 5,000 feet, like, okay, what are the 3 questions about this position? What do we really want to know? Let's not hold back. Let's not allow for there to be any elephants in the room. When is Georgia going to have another Roquan Smith? Because they didn't have anybody do it at linebacker last year. And, oh, by the way, a former Georgia assistant coach told me last summer that Monty Rice couldn't hold Roquan Smith's jock. So that's what he said. I mean, it's in there, and that's the truth. And the season played out, and, Monty was 3rd on the team in tackles, even though he missed 3 games. And the fact is, he wasn't anywhere close to being Roquan Smith. Nobody on the Georgia team was. There were no leaders like that on defense last year. And there's only so many players like Roquan Smith out there. He's a special player, but you know what? It takes special players to do special things. And as we look back and reflect, if you plug Roquan Smith into the Georgia defense last year, just hypothetical, does LSU go 4 for 4 on 4th downs? I don't think so, right? So that's what I mean. And you go, wow, could one player – yeah, one player could make it – is hard as Elijah Holyfield ran, as good as DeAndre Swift looked in some games. Did they equal Nick Chubb and Sony Michel from 2017? No, they didn't. They weren't as good. They weren't. I mean, they just weren't. It's nothing personal. So there's critical analysis involved. And don't think for a moment that Kirby Smart doesn't have the same sort of conversations behind closed doors with us. Look, Kirby's not whistling Dixie right now thinking everything's groovy, okay? He's not happy with the way things turned out last year. He wasn't happy with the Sugar Bowl. He certainly wasn't happy with the SEC championship game. He was irate to miss the college football playoff. He made a very passionate and rational plea that if you want the 4 best teams in as of December 1, Georgia was one of those teams. And don't start with the, oh, well, look how it all turned out. Look, Clemson was not better than Alabama before January 9th or whenever that game was. They weren't. Clemson would not have beaten Alabama in September. They wouldn't have beaten Georgia either. Clemson wouldn't have beaten Georgia or Alabama last September or last October, and I don't think November. Now, did Clemson put it all together in the playoff? Boy, they sure did. Trevor Lawrence looked outstanding. But remember, early in the year, they struggled. They struggled to beat Texas A&M. They had another close game. Was it Syracuse? Some team that Notre Dame beat by 5 touchdowns. So teams grow and evolve, and sometimes forward and sometimes back. And when Georgia lost the SEC championship game, they left their hearts in Atlanta. They weren't the same team in New Orleans. I'm not going to waste any more time on that. Anybody with half a brain knows that. But my point is this. Kirby Smart knows there's things that have to be fixed. Now, just for fun, I went back and watched Kirby's press conference from after G-Day last year. And he talked about a huge leadership void. And in hindsight, I think we would probably agree that leadership void was never really filled. Not adequately, at least. Now, the Georgia team was focused last year. Incredibly focused. Incredibly bought in. I was impressed. I really was. The poise that Georgia showed in September, even into October, the LSU game was a wake-up call. But the way they responded to that, I thought Jake Fromm really responded to that. Even with the whole Justin Fields music in the background or noise or whatever you want to call it, having another quarterback that talented on the roster, a good problem to have maybe, but also potential distraction. I thought Georgia was focused. But that said, I thought they had leadership issues in the sense of it was adequate leadership, but it wasn't like over-the-top leadership. Like there wasn't that guy in the locker room that could get him ready for Texas. As difficult a situation as it was, there needed to be somebody that said, hey, we got to play for the G on our helmet, or we got all these fans. We've got a reputation now. There's a certain expectation. They didn't do it. In fact, DeAndre Baker didn't play in the game. I can't say that I blame him for that, but I also can't say that I applaud the decision either. So leadership, back to that. I think leadership is going to be big again this year. I think they're poised to have better leadership this season. Certainly Jake Fromm will have a stronger grasp on the offensive locker room. He's a third-year starting quarterback. He's a veteran guy. Strikes me as very mature, very well liked by his teammates. And then on defense, and I wrote this, it's in my story today on my 3 questions about the Georgia secondary, which I felt strongly was the best secondary in the SEC. I even wondered if maybe best in the country. Georgia gave up fewer plays of 20 yards or more than any team in the country. And they played a pretty good schedule, by the way, when you consider their crossover games were Auburn and LSU, and that they played Alabama in the SEC championship game. J.R. Reed coming back to me, a story that didn't get enough attention. Should have got more love, should have got more hype. That JR came back. I think he's absolutely integral to a championship run, not only because of what he brings at the safety position, the leadership, the football IQ, but the tempo that he sets, his mindset. It was J.R. Reed that said last summer the SEC championship didn't mean anything because they didn't win a national title. He's very much got an all-or-nothing mentality. He's got that catalyst ability to make a difference with what he says, how he leads, how he plays. And I think big things for J.R. Reed this season. I think big things for Georgia football this season. I'm on record saying I think they're going to win the SEC. I do think there's challenges. I just think that they're going to overcome those challenges. When I say challenges, like one of them that jumps out at me is at running back. Still question marks on James Cook and Zamir White. Look, anytime you've got a running back with an injury, running backs are like racehorses, okay? I was a running back. I was more like a donkey, though. These guys that are at this level are so calibrated and so fast and so well trained and just so incredibly gifted that when something small goes wrong, when a running back has turf toe, it's different than when your center has turf toe. No offense to Lamont Gilliard and Trey Hill, but it's a lot more apparent when DeAndre Swift is missing a step than when one of the big uglies is missing. Those guys play through unbelievable. They're the toughest people on the planet. Those linemen play through so many injuries. They play such a brutal, blunt force position, where the speed and the quicks and the fast twitch isn't quite as important as it is to a running back or a receiver. So, that hence the whole racehorse, and you've heard the stable of running backs, right? Certainly, Georgia's had some unbelievable running backs. We mentioned Michelle and Chubb a minute ago. Swift was only really dialed in a couple few games last year. You saw when he was himself. Auburn certainly saw. Kentucky saw. Florida saw. November was DeAndre Swift month, but he wasn't himself most of the season. He re-injured himself in the South Carolina game, unbeknownst to us. He only played, I think, 4 or 5 snaps against Middle Tennessee. Just wasn't himself last year. And then it was later revealed that he had the double groin surgery. And it's like, oh, okay, no wonder, why Swift was limited in spring drills. And so this is the first healthy offseason that DeAndre's had. Now, can he stay healthy? So durability is a question. If he stays healthy, he's a Heisman Trophy finalist. No fans or buts about it. Now, I wonder how they'll use him, right? We know they like to platoon the running backs a little bit. Now I wonder, was last year out of necessity, or is that what we're going to see more of? I think you will see a platoon. I don't know how much. And when we see the platoon, how's it going to be? Like, if I were in charge, which I'm not Kirby Smart making $7 million a year, but if I was, Brian Herrien would be in the backfield with Swift at times in the shotgun. And he'd be my draw guy, and he would be my short yardage guy, and Swift would be my pitch guy, and Swift would be my little fling out into the flats guy. I want Swift in space. It's not that I don't think DeAndre Swift can run between the tackles. He can, and there'd be times that he would. Maybe sometimes I'd put him over the top. But I think Herrien is a blue-collar guy that runs tough. He impressed me as the only one that seemed to really I shouldn't say the only one, but he showed up at the Sugar Bowl. I really liked what I saw from him there. And I remember a couple years ago, I always mention when I covered Tennessee, and people kill me for it, but I remembered covering Tennessee and seeing Herrien and saying, man, that guy's good, right? And so I've seen him flash. Now, I don't know what else goes into it. I don't know what his practice habits are. I haven't kept up with his Twitter lately. I know he had some controversial stuff earlier, but I don't know where Brian's at as a leader, as a senior, from a maturity standpoint. But from a talent standpoint, he's shown me he can play. And I think we're going to see more of him. I'd like to see him between the tackles. I think he's just a tough guy. He's the guy that just puts his head down and he'll run through that brick wall for you. And some of these other guys want to dance. And it just drives me nuts when you can't pick up a yard. We saw that, Elijah Holyfield, love the guy, 2 of 7 on 3rd and 4th and 1s. I mean, you got to convert at a higher clip than that. I don't know what Swift's numbers were, but Herrien was the most effective running back in those situations last year. James Cook, exciting, electric. I think I must not have wrote it very well. Somebody mistook what I said. I said that his production didn't match his talent. What I meant to say was I thought they should have done even more with James Cook last year. I thought he was underutilized. And again, I said I didn't know where to place the blame. Do you put it on Chaney? Do you put it on Cook? Again, I don't get to watch practices. Kirby closes that off unless you donate a certain amount of money to the program. Or do you put it on, just the fact there were so many talented guys, right? But I think that Cook is a game-changing type of player. To me, he's the kind of guy that when one team scores, 3 plays later, it's James Cook who can go 87 yards on a screen or 90 yards on a kickoff return. This guy's unbelievable. I mean, I know what I saw. I know what I've seen. I've seen great running backs before. This guy's got the juice. I don't know what he's done in the offseason. He does need to get thicker. Durability is a question with him, obviously. He got injured late. He didn't really get a lot of touches in prime time. Some people pointed out his numbers came against bad teams. That's when he got in the game. They weren't getting him in the game before that. So it's going to be up to James Cook to win those carries. And, of course, Zamir White, big question mark. If the game was played in a weight room, he's ready to go. You guys have seen Zamir on Twitter and Instagram. I mean, this guy is built, man. I mean, he is built. and his upper body, his muscle definition. I mean, there's no doubt this guy's been putting in the time in the weight room. But you don't play the game in the weight room. You play it on a football field. And the question is going to be about his durability. And after 2 knee surgeries, does he still have the cutting ability? Is the mentality there for him to just cut it loose and play with reckless abandon and not even think twice about his knees if he's running the dive, or if Kirby wants him on the special teams to go down as a gunner, or block and punt protect, wherever Kirby puts him? Is he ready to just run out and do that and not think twice about it? Because you've got to be an effective football player. And anybody that plays the game knows that. When you're out there playing football, you cannot be thinking, I don't want to get hurt on this play. I hope I don't get hurt on this play. There can be no thought of that whatsoever. It's got to be fearless, focused, mission-driven mentality every snap with no peripheral distraction, or you're not going to be effective. And I think Zamir White wasn't ready mentally last year. I watched him in that open scrimmage. He didn't look like he ran with the same cuts or authority that I saw in his high school footage. Now, some of it was he was playing a college game, but he didn't look explosive that day. James Cook did. So that said, that's a position of concern of sorts. It could be a strength if everything works out well, which I'm guessing it will be. So when I make these predictions about Georgia winning the SEC, of course, I'm assuming that Swift is going to prove durable and that Herrien is going to produce those tough yards like we saw him do in the Sugar Bowl and when he's been given opportunities. Receiving core, this is where the focus of the spring is really going to be, for a couple of reasons. One, Kirby Smart's a smart guy, and the last thing he's going to do is run these running backs, Cook and Zamir White, and risk getting him hurt again if they're not 100%. There's no reason to pound 11 on 10. I'm not saying they're not going to have some of that, but not like you're going to have when everybody's healthy, okay? And they need to work on their pass game. They really, really need to. When you look at the fact that they lost four of the top 5 pass catchers, you got J.J. Holloman and Tyler Simmons back, right? But who else caught the ball that's coming back? Not much there. So Jake's got to get on the same page, with Bush and Landers, and Demetrius Robertson has got to show Kirby that he can block. If he can't block and play special teams, Kirby's not going to let him touch the ball. Or he's not going to be in the game, a receiver to touch the ball. I mean, we saw it last year. There were guys ahead of him on the depth chart. And just because he's a 5-star doesn't mean the doors are open. Come on in. Here's the starting. It's not how it works at Georgia. You got to earn it. Doesn't matter who you are. And we've seen that time and time again. I don't know why people, have a problem with that concept. He should have played this guy more. He wouldn't have transferred. No, that guy should have worked harder and earned more snaps and done more when he was in the games. So it's not a Kirby Smart or a Georgia problem, right? It's a player problem. Because Kirby's going to play the best guys. He doesn't have time to play favorites, right? His favorites are the guy that worked the hardest and get the best results. That's Kirby Smart's favorites. So this is how it is in big-time football. Nothing's promised. And just because you started last year, the secondary this year is a great example. I'm not so sure Devon Wilson won't be the starting star. I'm not sure he's not going to, move ahead on the depth chart of a guy that, McGee that played there last year and did a pretty good job, I might add. Same thing at linebacker is that maybe Adam Anderson's going to move ahead of Walter Grant. I'm trying to think, what big plays did we ever see Walter Grant make? Did he do anything? The stats say he did, but I'm trying to think of one play where I went, wow, look at Walter Grant. Can't think of any. I'd say that for the linebacking core. Now, I think Tate Crowder had a couple picks, and I think that Tate Crowder could be a breakout player. He's got the look. He's a converted running back. I don't know where Tay's at, in terms of understanding the scheme and it being secondary to him. But you look at Tate Crowder and you say, this looks like an NFL linebacker. And this guy runs like an NFL linebacker. And he had a couple interceptions. And we really didn't see linebackers make many plays last year. DeAndre Walker Yes, from a pass rush standpoint, but Georgia linebackers really didn't do much in pass coverage. They really didn't, and they really didn't. They didn't make enough plays. There wasn't enough sacks. There wasn't enough forced fumbles. They just didn't. It was not an adequate unit overall last year. Linebackers were the front seven in general. Now they got tougher and better against the run the second half of the season, but from a playmaking standpoint, it wasn't up to par. And I think that's a unit that's going to make great strides this year. These are things that, Kirby Smart, he'll talk about different position groups, and he'll talk about early enrollees. It'll just be good to hear the head coach talk again tomorrow. You can tell I've got a lot of things on my mind with Georgia football, things they've got to address, areas that they have to get better. But at the end of the day, I believe they will. I believe they will, based on what I saw last year, based on the focus that I saw out of that group, that I thought lacked the leadership. In the sense of the Roquan Smith, the perfect leadership. It was adequate last year. I think Kirby's a great coach. I think he's got buy-in. I like his schemes. I think he's smart. I don't think he felt like he had enough in the front seven to blitz and take chances, and that's why he played a more conservative style, which led to Georgia not giving up many plays over 20 yards. This is just Kirby being able to evaluate his talent and say what's going to work best with these guys. And now Kirby's telling us that this season he's going to be more active with his front seven because they're more experienced. So the head coach has more confidence in that front seven. That's a really good sign. And I think it means more playmaking because when teams are under duress and pressured, they're more likely to make mistakes. So I think you're going to see some results in these areas that we talked about today. Offensively, how many times do we got to talk about how great this offensive line is? I've never seen one better at college level. Jake's a third-year starter at quarterback. We've talked about the questions at running back and receiver. Okay, so they're going to work a lot on that in the spring. A lot of pass game in the spring, a lot of pass protection as well in the spring, as Georgia looks to have a very healthy spring and get into the summer with everyone healthy. So they can make a championship run because it's a long season, right? You got to play, 15 games now? Is that right? 12 regular season, conference championship 13, 14, 15-game season now. That's a lot. So looking forward to asking Kirby some questions tomorrow. I'm going to go here now and see what questions you might have for me on Facebook. This is always the awkward part for me. I don't like to take my eyes off the screen when I do these type of things. I like to keep looking at you all, but to read these questions, I don't have a producer here or a teleprompter. So let's see what questions we have. You just never know. Georgia fans. Okay, the Florida fans are beating me up a pretty good bit today because I said that Georgia could return the best secondary in the SEC. Oh, David West says Clemson defense is intimidating. Ask Bama. I'll ask Texas A&M. How about that? Or Syracuse. We'll see what Clemson does this year. They got a really easy schedule. Oh, my gosh, do they got an easy schedule. I think they got A&M coming to them. And what is their other tough game? South Carolina? I don't know. It's Clemson will be back in the playoff. Probably pretty healthy. I agree with Marco Thomas about the front seven needing to play downhill more. Dave Jackson, you and I both looking forward to April 20th, G-Day. And James Bryan, I wondered the same thing, James, last year in those short yardage situations. What if Tay Crowder was still at running back? Because they really struggled. That Florida game comes to mind when they had 6 or 7 plays from the 2-yard line, couldn't get in. Yeah, Kerry Williams, Monty was in position a lot. Just a sophomore, a young guy. I think we'll see a jump from Monty Rice, but I just, the thought that he's going to be the next Roquan Smith is just not going to happen. Let's see what else we got here. Caleb Squires, which freshman is going to shine the most this season? Oh, man. That is tough. I cannot answer that question yet. It could be at linebacker. It could be in the secondary. It could be at running back. Could be at receiver. How about George Pickens? Heard a lot about him. And the other freshman signing wide receiver. early signee, not on campus yet. Forgive me, I've been writing all these position groups today. I'd say the best opportunities at receiver, as difficult as it is to learn that position. I think that Kirby recognizes he's got to get his best talent out there. He said that there would be more guys that would play this year. He said it would be more of a committee. So that leads me to think that Kirby also thinks one of these incoming freshman receivers, or both, could make an impact. I can't speak for him, but the fact that he's already said he wants more of a committee makes me think that the freshmen have a better opportunity to contribute this year. Can Quay, Channing, or Dean push Monty for the position? I think Monty's going to go to Will, and I think Crowder's going to be inside at the mic. So that's my thought. I think all those guys, Tyndall, Quay Walker, Kobe Dean, I think all those guys are going to push. There's a lot of talent coming in right now. There's going to be a lot of competition for playing time there. Notre Dame this year, it's going to be a big game. It'll be a fun game. It's a game Georgia should win by 2 touchdowns. Justin Sisk says Clemson losing almost the entire front 7, but the schedule is set up to play high school offenses. That's true. And I don't know what the drug testing policy is there. I know that after 3 out of the 20 guys failed drug tests at the bowl game or in the playoffs, that there was some concern about that. I haven't heard anything about Dabo changing the drug policy there, the drug testing policy. That's something I'm guessing a lot of people will follow up on. I mean, when 3 out of 20, what is that, 15%? When 15% of your people test positive for a banned substance, that's a red flag. 15% is a high number. Yeah. William Gray, any worries about the young coaching staff? Well, that's a great point. You know what? Yeah, a little bit. My thought is this, Kirby promoted from within because he believes in his system. And even though you lose veteran coaches in Jim Chaney and Mel Tucker, by promoting from within, you maintain continuity. It's a way to maintain continuity even as you're losing coaches. Now, is 32-year-old Dan Lanning and 28-year-old Glenn Schumann, are they ready to take on the challenges of being coordinators? Let's be real here. Kirby Smart is the defensive coordinator, okay? He was defensive coordinator last year. He's been the defensive coordinator since he took over. Kirby runs the show on defense. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, Mel Tucker certainly contributed great ideas and was a guy that Kirby held in great respect, and just a wonderful relationship between Kirby and Mel. And now he's hired Mr. Intensity, former Air Force player Charlton Warren, away from Florida, a guy that I covered some at Tennessee. Disciplined guy. I think Kirby and Charlton are going to just hit it off wonderfully. But I think Kirby's going to rely more on himself for the scheme aspect now. Kirby's 43, and he's the mastermind of this whole Georgia program. My only concern is I hope Kirby's not trying to put too much on himself. 43, is young in coach years, right? And he's already done so much. He's such an impressive person. But sometimes those personalities have a tendency to take on too much, and I've seen it happen before. And I just hope Kirby continues to delegate to the point, where he's not driving himself crazy trying to do too much with those young coaches, as you mentioned. So that's a great point. On the offense, Kirby must feel very strong about James Coley to make that move. It was always going to be Coley. That was going to be who the play caller was. Kirby had to make a decision when Texas A&M tried to hire Coley. And when he made that decision to make Coley his quarterback coach, he pretty much, Jim Chaney was pretty much 1 foot out the door when that happened. So this is a progression that was expected, that, Kirby Smart obviously made this decision a year ago, 1 year before it happened. And that's why Coley was sitting up in the box next to Jim last year during the play calling. And I think this is Coley's chance to shine. This is the guy that Kirby's put his money on. He's betting on James Coley. And sounds like Jake Fromm's excited about it. I think from what little I've heard, a little bit more up-tempo from this offense. I think you're going to see some more throwing to the running backs. Kirby's going to make sure they can run the ball. They ain't getting away from that. But I think you're going to see more of those extended handoffs, those passes, those shovels, right? High percentage. It's like a long handoff, as they say. You're still accomplishing the same thing you do running the ball without actually handing it off. And what you really want to do is get DeAndre Swift in space. I'm just not sure there's a better running back in the country than DeAndre Swift when he's healthy. And I can't wait to find out. Now, spring football, we're going to dive in tomorrow. Man, the coverage on Dog Nation is going to be unbelievable. Brandon Adams is going to be there. Jeff Sentell is going to be there. We're sending the whole Dog Nation team over there to Butts-Mehre Heritage Hall tomorrow. I'm excited about having those guys around. We're going to absolutely swarm that practice. You're going to want to check your Dog Nation feed all day. If you don't have the app, you're missing out. We put out pushes when there's breaking news. We're not going to bug you with the insignificant stuff. But when news breaks, you get the alert. You need to have that. Sign up for our email alerts and get that Dog Nation app, man. It makes me feel good. I know so many people are reading this in the off season. Georgia fans are always pulling out the phone and checking, because they never know when me or Chip or Jeff or Connor or Michael Carvel are going to post something that you're going to want to read, and you want to be on the front end of it, right? I drove up to Nashville. I'll tell this quick story. And then I got to cut it off. They're giving me the 1 minute sign. I always go over the 30-minute allotment. I like to do a good job for Ingles, right? But I drove up to Nashville last Tuesday for the SEC basketball tournament. I was in the car. I don't know. It's like a 6.5 hour drive with traffic. Nashville's further than you think. I get up there and I get up there and I pull in the parking lot and I go to this restaurant and I'm kind of scrolling Twitter, right? And that's where I get my news. I follow my Dog Nation teammates and some national guys. I keep seeing these Aunt Becky references. What in the hell are they talking about, Aunt Becky? What could possibly where does an Aunt Becky fit into the sports theme, right? And, you ever eat while you're looking at your phone and piecing stories together over dinner off of Twitter, and I'm just going, this is unbelievable. These people paid this. These people, paid that. Wow, money, privilege, people they spend money. They get to, get into certain things that other people don't. That happens. It does. It does. But that story was fascinating. But my point is this: 5 hours in the car, 5.5 hours in the car, and I missed unbelievable stuff. And, if you follow us on Dog Nation app, you're not going to miss that. Because, it took me a day to catch up with the world on Aunt Becky and the schools and the programs and all that kind of stuff going on. And then I had other, basketball stuff obviously going on. So, but yeah, you want to follow us there. Follow me on Twitter. Listen, I need the support right now. These Florida fans, I thought Georgia won last year's game. Am I mistaken? In fact, I thought Georgia won the last 2 games. But to read my Twitter feed, you would think Florida has won 100 games in a row. And I like it that Florida is cocky. I think it's fun. I don't like it when they attack me, when they tell me that Florida's secondary was so much better than Georgia's. Based on what? I was there in Jacksonville. Oh, well, this guy got hurt. Well, whose fault is that? How good was he then if he's falling down, getting hurt the third play of the game? I mean, where's your depth at, right? I mean, Georgia had guys go down. Georgia had injuries. Poor Tyson Campbell separated his shoulder in September, played the whole year with a shoulder popping in and out of joint. You don't hear anybody crying or playing the violin for him. Oh, well, Tyson Campbell. No. Florida's like, oh, we had the best secondary. They weren't out there. So follow me on Twitter because I don't want to get into that much of the contest with it. Georgia fans usually take care of these arguments pretty successfully. My Twitter account is @MikeGriffith32, and you can see all these wonderful Florida fans telling me how great their secondary was last year. That was better than Georgia's, even though I put up the stats where Jake Fromm had like 196 passer rating on him, and their quarterback had like a 110. against Georgia, but supposedly that doesn't matter to them. I don't know. And I had a little fun with the Texas fans. It looks like that Georgia basketball win probably cost Texas an NCAA tournament slot. So maybe a little bit of a sugar payback. Not saying Georgia fans wouldn't trade a Sugar Bowl win for that game, but it is what it is, right? So listen, everybody, have a great Monday. You will see me tomorrow. I'll do a stand-up with Chip. You'll see Brandon Adams. I'll be doing a stand-up with him before media day. Tomorrow is like a national holiday for Georgia football fans. Spring practice is finally here. Kirby's going to talk. Can't wait to hear what he's got to say. Thanks for joining me on the Eagles on the Beat segment each Monday. Again, have a great Monday, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.